let's talk about potential future job titles. You have been, there has been speculation that you may be the next US ambassador to the EU. Can you give us any clarity on that?
Oh, as I've said to other people, I have obviously talked to the president, and I've been interviewed by the Trump transition team in Trump Towers.
For that job?
For that job. Other than that, there's really nothing to report. One waits for a nomination. One doesn't make a self-nomination.
When would one expect such news to be forthcoming?
They were frankly waiting for the confirmation of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, which just happened the other night. So now, frankly, lots of ambassadors, deputies, undersecretaries in the State Department will be named. So I would expect that these decisions will be forthcoming.
Jean-Claude Juncker has said this morning that he feels that sometimes the new US administration doesn't understand the EU. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my rejoinder is, having spent some time in Brussels, is sometimes the EU doesn't understand the EU. It is an overly complex, fairly bloated bureaucratic organization that is very difficult to explain internally and externally. So it does take some time to understand what the EU is, what its history is, where it has been, where it is going, what its present state is, what its ambitions are, whether it's just an economic integration or it has a very, very big political agenda.
Are you pro-EU? And if so, or are you anti-EU? Because I just want to find that there's a letter here which I just want to quote. So let me put my reading glasses on and we can read this. This is from Manfred Weber, who is the leader of the centre-right EPP party, and Guy Verhofstadt, who leads the ALDE. And in this letter, which I think they've written to the Commission, though it could be the Council, let me just double-check on that, they accuse you of outrageous malevolence towards the values that define this European Union.
Well, I think that's patently false. They've never met me, talked to me, or read anything I've written. So that would be a mischaracterization.
This is a letter that's being reported in The Guardian yesterday.
Yes, I'm familiar.
I'm sure you've read it.
I haven't read the letter. I've only read the account in The Guardian, so I don't know what the letter says. And the letter, I think, you know, is addressing the question of future ambassadorship and whether a person should have only pro-EU sentiments or views. Well, within the European Union itself, there are probably 3 or 4 different views on what the European Union should be or where it may go. And in the very parliament you're talking about, the constellation is sprayed across the whole spectrum of opinion. But frankly, the Americans get to pick who their ambassador to a country or a mission would be. It's never the case that a country gets to pick or a mission gets to pick who that ambassador is.
Ted, let me just ask you, because you had a previous role with the UN in Geneva, and in a BBC interview, you said that you had a previous career in a diplomatic post, referring to that role in Geneva, I'm guessing, where I helped bring down the Soviet Union. Maybe there's another union that needs a little taming. What do you think needs to happen with the EU in order to tame it?
Well, I think its ambitions have basically overstepped its capabilities. So the question really is what the European member states want to see for that European Union. Of course, the most significant political fact on the immediate horizon is Brexit. And there are other elections, of course, forthcoming in the next number of months and over the course of 2017 in a number of European countries, where the whole question of European integration, the future of the euro, the future of the European Union, in or out, is very much on the ballot. So I would personally like to see more countries have referenda where the actual citizens of those countries made democratic decisions about their own sentiments towards a European Union of one sort or another. It's not for the United States, clearly, to define what a European Union is.
But, well, let me still ask you to give at least a shot at a definition of what it should be. Don't you think that it's been helpful to allow, you know, people to use one currency across this group of nations, to allow people and businesses, commerce, to travel freely across borders without having to deal with all the red tape and regulation that came with doing business cross-border before the EU?
Well, clearly, you just had that debate leave, remain in the UK, and there were arguments, and I'm an economist, so you have arguments, frankly, on both sides And the question of political sovereignty and immigration was also very much part of that debate. So I think that in any given country, you'd probably have, frankly, a different answer to that question. Again, the U.S. view on the EU shouldn't be pro or anti-EU. We're simply trying to deal with whatever constellation the Europeans put forward as a way of kind of European investment and in terms of European economic integration.
As an economist who, studied at Yale and Oxford, and I believe Margaret Thatcher once called you her global Sherpa, what do you think about the basic idea of, free trade? What do you think about, barriers, regulatory and national border and otherwise, being struck down to allow people and money to transition across them easily?
Well, on the whole, economists, and I would put myself in that category, favor free trade, have favored free trade, see the benefits of free trade, see the economic growth that is spurred by free trade. However, increasingly, it's clear that we need a degree of fair trade as well, so that we have to look at the imbalances that are, struck up in the international system, and sometimes either currencies or countries manipulate trade to their own advantage. Obviously, there's dumping of goods in global markets and even manipulation of currency. So I think part of what President Trump and, frankly, his new Economic Trade Council under Professor Navarro will be doing is looking at some of these questions with greater scrutiny to see, in fact, in our future bilateral relations and bilateral treaties that there would be a fairer notion of this free trade.
Professor, you bring up Mr. Navarro. Let's talk a little bit about currencies. Isn't there a danger that if we were to see a weakening of the EU, that we would see a weakening of the euro, and that would lead to a strengthening of the dollar, and that wouldn't necessarily be good for US workers?
So we have witnessed already a weakening in the euro. Depending on which time frame you're looking at. And again, I'm not a currency market analyst.
But it could have a significant impact on...
Indeed. But most of the people in the market that I talk to, most of the economists at investment banks, money center banks, are suggesting even in the immediate future that there could be parity between the US dollar and the euro. There are other places in hedge funds where they're actually making fairly large bets against the euro. They see the downside risks, some of which are political risks, or the coming apart, frankly, of the euro.
That's a good thing or a bad thing?
This is a good thing. It's an objective thing. It's happening. It has been happening. We have to deal with it as it happens. Would it lead potentially to a stronger dollar? Yes, it could. Would interest rates in the United States also lead to a stronger dollar if they are creeping up, as some people expect? Yes.
Is Germany abusing the currency?
Peter Navarro has a study. Other economists have made similar studies. It probably depends on which time series you're looking at, over which period you're looking at the data. It looks to me like, at least on one, if not two of the categories of currency manipulation, Germany has tilted the tables towards itself, to the disadvantage, frankly, of Southern Europe or periphery Europe, and that would be particularly Spain, Portugal, Italy, and Greece. No, I'm saying the euro has been.
But what about the United States? Is it to the disadvantage of the United States?
Yes, it is grossly to the disadvantage of the United States, because it leads to cheap exports coming from Germany and flooding even the U.S. market.
Let's talk a little bit about Greece. You talked about it very briefly there. Do you think that the administration has a view on what the IMF's role should be within the Greek bailout package? I'm
not privy to that view. I haven't been part of any of those discussions. I'm frankly not in the administration. I'm in this period of abeyance.
You've had discussions.
I've had discussions. I think there is question, frankly, about whether there should be a bailout and whose responsibility that bailout would be, and why Greece continues in the same kind of stagnating situation that it's found itself over the last period of years, and why this situation hasn't been solved.
Do you think Greece should leave the EU?
I don't want to speak for the Greeks, but I think there is probably, from an economist's perspective, a very strong reason for Greece moving away from the euro.